Mic check. Hey Krieg, good to see ya. You're my favorite. Don't tell anyone though, just between you and me.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our Dire Discusses on red flag laws. Along with me is my co-host and producer, Fox Trevize. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing fantastic, and I expect no audio issues tonight. How about that? So if I am wrong, let me know now.
You're such a dreamer.
I am a dreamer. Yes, I have a dream that one day my stream will be judged not by the quality of the imagery, but by the fact that we're actually transmitting audio.
Woot. Of course, we're behind lines on YouTube where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. You guys, all of you that sponsors this channel, those who donate to us financially, make this show possible. Thank you very much for using the Streamlabs link and or bits and or Lino or whatever way you choose to donate to us. We appreciate it no matter how you do it. And if you don't donate to us financially, we very much appreciate the one most powerful thing any one of you could do, which is to share these videos. We're not long for this world with YouTube.
They're coming for us. They're coming for us.
There's no way we're going to church up our content enough to meet their guidelines. So we're just they just haven't got around to get to banning us yet. The purge has already begun.
Yeah, I've heard that they've been going after, which is actually contrary to what a lot of people are thinking. They actually are targeting large channels first. Like they're going after controversial people to like make sure everybody knows that they mean business. So I think it'll be a bit before they get to us. You know, we're a good mid-sized channel, but we'll see how long it takes. So,
and that's just more reason why you should go to that link below or find us on DLive. I didn't move the link there, but I'll do it right now. Well, next time that Fox is talking, I'm gonna do it.
Damn it! damn it! That's a GIF there.
Which GIF is that? Oh, that one. Yes, that is definitely a GIF.
That is a GIF.
So the best way you can help us out really is to share this video and also come over to DLive and follow us there. If you're following us on YouTube, you're not going to be able to see our future content because it's going to be removed by YouTube, and or we're going to start just uploading our content in other places. We're going to be on Minds. We're going to be on Twitch, obviously. DLive, and I'm forgetting one.
BitChute?
What? BitChute. We are on BitChute. So follow us and please take a moment to share this video. It'd be very much appreciated. So, Fox, let's get on to these red flag laws.
The red what laws?
Flag. The flag. There's an L in there.
That's a whole different show. Alrighty. So I am going to start off with defining how Dire and I will be discussing red flag laws, because red flag, when people are talking about red flag laws, the actual laws that have been implemented and the types of laws that are being discussed cover a very broad range of things as to what it is that they're going to try to do and what it is that they mean by saying red flag. So we're going to go through and define what it is that we mean when we're saying red flag, just so that you guys have like a baseline for what it is that we're talking about. So first up is red flag laws allow courts to issue orders to temporarily confiscate firearms of an individual deemed to be a risk to others or themselves. In these states, with these laws, the person or agency applying for the warrant to confiscate the firearms from another person must provide evidence that they are a threat to themselves or others. The people that can make these petitions for an appeal to a red flag law to the state, let's see here, including okay, so it could be, in some states they've got lawyers or police officer or a member of the family or a resident in the target's household. It could also be any random person off the street giving a tip to the FBI. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here is who's allowed to actually propose that they target you with a red flag order.
Right. The biggest problem is the last one you just mentioned. So most of the cases so far, when it's been someone close to the person that's making the call, it's because there's an actual crime being committed or there's a threat of violence. Not that it's always going to be that way. You could have a family member or someone who lives with you just a jerk and then makes a false claim, which could happen. But it's far more likely that some random person calling the police and or FBI could make a unsubstantiated claim, even provide the slightest of evidence, which is like someone's personal account saying that there was a threat of violence, and they could end up taking away that person's guns, or worse, put them in a situation where they might try to take the guns away from that person, and they get into a shootout because of it.
They'll prompt a situation that is more dangerous. And so, let's see. We also have in our definition these. Let's see. Yeah. So orders that are confidential unless the court rules. So that's normally not how. Normally warrants are public record, or there should be. Our court proceedings are public record, and so these kind of happen outside of the more traditional court routes. And then, while some proposed red flag laws may look different, being more or less aggressive, depending on which state it is or who's proposing it, this is kind of what we're considering to be red flag laws, no matter what name they're giving them. So, some states like Connecticut, we're going to talk about here in a bit. They've got some other kind of happy, fun, go lucky name for it that isn't red flag. Not all these laws are going to have red flag in them, but this is how we're going to identify laws that don't otherwise identify themselves as being red flag in the name.
Yeah, these orders, just to clarify, the red flag order applies to the no notice order that is done very quickly. So someone makes an accusation, goes to a court, but doesn't provide the person being accused of a crime any ability to contradict the evidence against them, provide their own evidence, face their accuser, or have any kind of due process. It is a notice to the court. The court makes a split decision, a split-second decision on it, right? And then they go execute it. And it happens very quickly. And then after they've already taken this person's firearms away and already stepped on their rights, their constitutional rights, afterward, to keep the guns from that person, they have to go on and do a actual real court case.
Thank you very much, Krieg Blackpaw, for giving us a diamond. And he says, Dems in Virginia are threatening National Guard to enforce gun laws. That is on the docket tonight. We will be getting to that shortly. Before we do that, Dyer, do you want to run through some of the... Let's just do a real quick debunk of some of the straw men that the left likes to throw up anytime somebody talks about gun laws.
Absolutely. First off, we don't want kids to die. We're not saying
we're opposed.
The motivation for not wanting red flag laws is not because we want there to be more mass shootings at schools. We don't want kids to die. We have the same motive to want to protect kids as the left do. We just feel that there is a better way to do it without giving away our freedoms to the state. We also don't we don't like criminals, and we don't want mass shootings. We're just as opposed to mass shooters and criminals committing violent crimes as the left. We just have a different way of addressing the problems, because we want to address the core issue while still maintaining the maximum of freedoms for everybody. And they want to destroy our legal system and our freedoms for the promise, and most likely the false promise, of more security.
Yes. All right. So that takes care of the left, and then one more bit of house cleaning before we really get into this, and that's a little bit of a disclaimer. I want to just let all you guys know we are advocating that you have a right to defend yourself when it is under anything that is constitutionally protected. You have the right to defend yourself on that. Every red flag law is going to be unique, though. We have 50 different states that those might be implemented in, and there's no possible way that Dyer and I could possibly give you any instruction onto how to handle those in every possible scenario. And just because there are unlawful reasons that law enforcement might come for you, as in the case of red flag laws, there's also still lawful ones as well. So we are not advocating for you to get into shootouts with cops and just say that it's because it's red flag laws. We're not saying that. Don't do that. And we're not advocating that you guys form guerrilla cells in your hometowns to go after police that are coming after your guns, whether or not you think that they are or not. If that's something you want to do, we did not tell you to do that. We are advocating that you follow the law and that you exhaust every peaceful option available to you before resorting to anything else. So do not take anything that we say as a license to resist the cops at every turn. But if you have guns, you should spend a lot of time reflecting with yourself what is happening in the world, how it might affect you, and how you think you should react to it. But in the end, only you can make that decision, not Dyer and I. So don't cite us in your legal proceedings, please.
Yes. And plus, I mean, how are you going to make a guerrilla cell? Where are you going to find all the guerrillas, right? That's just ridiculous. You have the inherent right to defend yourself from violence and also from your rights being taken from you. There is a good argument in a lot of cases to fight that battle in court when possible, because that way you are clearly in the right and you can secure
Happy
the
Christmas.
defeat
All
of
help support Operation Homefront. Any amount helps.
Well, thank you very much, Timberwolf. Timberwolf just donated $250 to Operation Homefront, which is our reminder to tell you that if you donate to us tonight on Streamlabs, we will pass that donation along to Operation Homefront, which I don't remember. What is? I know it's going to do with veterans. Do you remember what that charity does specifically, though?
It takes care of families of deployed individuals back home, I believe.
Okay.
It's we currently have $460. 450 of it are from Timberwolf himself. So this guy, by the way, all the donations, again, that if you make Streamlabs and you say anything about Operation Homefront in the Streamlab, it goes to that charity. Plus, we're also donating a little of our extra, our own. I know Fox is donating some, and I'm donating some. So actually, I forgot to mention your $50. So that means we're at $510 total right now. So that's a pretty good donation we got coming.
That's good.
So please, if you want to support that good charity, please do so via Streamlabs. In any case, you have a right to defend yourself, but I think that in a lot of cases, before if the country hasn't devolved into complete anarchy and civil war, there's a good argument for wanting to fight these battles in a courtroom, particularly since we have very supportive Supreme Court. We have very supportive Supreme Court right now. It's best to, if you're going to be the victim of one of these these unlawful orders, to fight it in court and defeat the law for good. It'd be great to set a precedent in the Supreme Court that these laws will never be legal ever again.
Yeah, and that goes along with what Trump's doing right now. Trump, while they're impeaching him, Trump's had victory after victory, but one of those major victories this past week was just an unprecedented number of circuit court judge appointments, where he's flipping all of these lower level courts over to really, really hard Republican, which is what we want. So I know a lot of people out in the world, probably some of the people in the audience, some of you are black-pilled. Dyer's describing, the anarchy, the fall of America. Some of you guys are like, I'm ready. I got my food rations and my iodine. I'm ready to go. Like, bring it on. We're not advocating for that. You shouldn't want that. And if that means that you get a knock on your door at 5 a.m. and you give up your guns, it's up to you whether or not you think it's the point to make the stand, but your better stand might be conceding the battle to win the war and take them to court and set a precedent.
So here's my way of with dealing this. If this ever someone were to try to to enact a red flag order on me, I would do the best of civil disobedience by forgetting the code to the safes. And yes, they're in different safes, multiple safes. Good luck. They're very heavy.
Yes.
I will make it as hard for them as possible, and then I will crush them in court. And they're going to pay me for all the damage they did to my gun safes, which, by the way, repairing a safe, is way more expensive than just buying a new one, and I will definitely have them pay for the repairs.
Fantastic. So, all right. So, what are some current events that we got going on here that have prompted us to have this discussion?
Well, there's been a few stories in the media recently. There was when Trump, he actually came out advocating in favor of red flag laws. This was just a bit surprised me. And people say, "Oh, we're always saying nice things about Trump." Well, no, not always. He has said a few things we've come out vehemently opposed to. And one of them is when he said after I think it was the El Paso shooting, was it, or the shooting in Texas, I believe. He came out and said that he was in favor of doing red flag laws as a solution. This is a quote from him during an interview with CNN. He said, We must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have the access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms are taken through rapid due process." That is a hell of a misnomer. It is not due process at all, Mr. Trump. The point of a red flag law is that there is no due process. That's the problem with them.
Well, and that's part of Trump's charm, right? He's a populist, so he hears people clamoring for things, and that's, for better or worse, that is Trump. He hears the raucous of the crowd, and he's like, all right, that's what they want. Let me look into that. And so he heard a lot of people clamoring for red flag laws, and so that was the thing that was in his head. There's only 240 characters that he can put on Twitter, and so he put out a thing about, all right, maybe I'll take a look at these. But, from what he was describing, he's looking at something that follows due process. He's not looking for something that is outside of that path.
Right. And I think that generally the problem with Trump a lot of times is he is quick to say something that he doesn't understand because he thinks it's popular. And then he later has people who are true conservatives go behind and say, "Hey, whoa, Mr. President, no." Definitely no. And he's reversed himself, but not apologize, because he's not going to apologize. But he has reversed himself after having been talked to by his advisors after making a knee-jerk decision about something. So I think he's simply ignorant of the full context of what red flags laws are, and he's probably being given some bad information because I know that because he's saying that there's due process in these red flag laws, and the one factor that unites all of the red flag laws in all 17 states that have them is that there is initially no due process.
Yeah. And I think while there's an obvious risk that Trump will accidentally say that he's looking for a red flag law, and he even specified that he was looking for one with due process. There's a possibility that he might use mistaken language, but I think that there's much less possibility that he would accidentally sign a bill that does not have due process in it. So there's what he says, and then there's what would actually make it through the legislative process to his desk that he would actually sign with all of his advisors. So that goes back to what Dyer was saying about sometimes he says stuff and he doesn't think it all the way through. That doesn't mean that's something he would legislate on, though.
Right. So when you pass a bill, it doesn't just say red flag law, and then that's it, right? The bill will in detail have to define what this red flag law is, and it's at that point he would be signing to authorize what he really wants, and so it doesn't matter what if it's called a red flag law, he can call it anything he wants. It's how that term is defined in the bill that would matter. But he shouldn't use that language if that's not what he means, and his advisors should be telling him not to say that. I have heard that argument that before, that he used the word red flag law and he actually doesn't mean it because it doesn't know the context behind it. Well, that's not I mean, that's kind of an excuse, but it's not an excuse I buy because there is an established meaning of red flag laws currently in 17 states, and that's not okay.
Yep. And here I was thinking that a bill walked around Washington and sang songs to itself.
Well, I mean, one did once in a cartoon.
Isn't that how all bills work?
Yeah, so how about Dan Crenshaw?
Yes, Dan Crenshaw. So the Trump kind of reinvigorated the discussion in August, and Dan Crenshaw picked up on that, and he got a lot of heat for this video that we're going to watch here. If I can toggle it over. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There we go. That one's got it.
Support for his support for something. Wow, what a week. So earlier this week, President Trump indicated his support for something called red flag laws. I stated on Twitter that maybe we should consider them at the state level. Maybe we should have a conversation about it, and it should be a conversation. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. What came out of it instead was hate-filled comments, lots of emotion, a lot of anger, a lot of memes. A lot of memes, by the way, which could be improved. Okay, but that's not the point. The point is that clearly even the words red flag law just emotionally triggered a lot of people. It made you guys really mad at me. And it seemed that no amount of explanation was able to quell your fears or convince you otherwise, and convince you that somehow the president and I had not betrayed you. That is not true, of course, and it's sad that many of you think that. It really is. But I did have some good conversations, some good private conversations with a lot of you, and this is what I found out. Clearly, when we say red flag laws, you guys stop listening. You can't hear what we're suggesting, because understandably, you automatically assume that we are just agreeing with the left's version of that law. And we all know that the left's version would not be good. It would not protect due process. But as it turns out, that isn't what we're talking about at all. At its heart, what we're talking about is the ability to confiscate weapons when there is clear evidence that violence is about to be committed. It's that simple. And this isn't that controversial. What is controversial is how that due process is protected. And I think that's where a lot of these concerns are. Making sure that due process could not be abused is at the heart of any conservative solution to the supposed red flag laws and our version of what those would look like. I have laid out specific safeguards that would have to be in place for us to support any type of red flag law. Okay, among them would be clear and convincing evidence, punishment for false accusations, right to attorney and cross-examination, and limited standing so that not just anybody can accuse you. For instance, not just a neighbor, not just an ex. It has to be somebody with standing, maybe a family member, or maybe only police officers. We've got a great study by Cato Institute that lays this out exactly. Here's the thing. I understand your fears about bad red flag laws. Red flag law is a general concept. There can be good ones and there can be bad ones. You should be against the bad ones, as I am. The whole purpose of what the president did and what I am doing and trying to start a conversation about this is so that we take control of the narrative and propose solutions that actually do protect due process rights and ensure that we aren't on the sidelines when Democrats are proposing blatantly unconstitutional laws that would not protect due process. The last thing is this. No one is saying this is definitely the solution. It's a conversation. I haven't come out in support of any particular bill or state law. It's a conversation that conservatives have actually been having for a very long time. It's not new at all. And it definitely does not deserve the emotional reaction it has gotten. We are better than that. Let's be better than that.
All right, so that was a pretty... So I know that there's been a lot of discussion about Dan Crenshaw and what it is that he actually said for a while now, but I think looking back on what he actually said back at the time, it was a pretty sober take. But let's take a look at that. So I don't necessarily disagree with Dan here. It's something that does deserve discussion. Hence why Dyer is discussing it tonight. And our conclusion, spoiler alert, is that we are going to be against them. Fundamentally, it is not possible to make a good, quote, good red flag law. That is what Dan was saying there, is that we should make a distinction between good and bad flag laws, red flag laws. And I think what Dyer and I are going to lay out here tonight is that it's not possible to make a good red flag law. But it does require some discussion to understand why we can't have good red flag laws. Why is that hard to say? Jeez. Yes, red law bad, but we are better than that. We are smarter than that. Dan is right about that. And we are more principled than that. And so that is why we are going to give this topic its due discussion. And thank you for the diamond again, Krieg.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Confiscation without a crime is unconstitutional. The end. I agree.
Yes. I want to point out, though, what he described under the title of red flag law, allowing a lawyer to what was it? A defense lawyer to be involved in the decision, right? That alone is nothing similar to a red flag law. You know. No sound. No sound.
Damn it.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear Dyer? Or
They can hear you.
or-
I was muted
Okay.
for some reason.
All right. So
Did none of that get transmitted?
none of that got through.
God.
Yeah. I want to point out also, before you go back over what you just read,
God damn it.
is that he was saying that it would only apply when there was a immediate danger, right? And I think what he was implying by that was a legitimate crime has been committed, either the threat of violence or the police are allowed to act when a crime is about to be conducted, like someone's going to go do a shooting, that they're allowed to step in, right? If someone is in the process of robbing a bank, but has not shot anyone yet, a police officer, without having to go through any legal proceedings, is able to stop that bank robbery, right?
Yep.
You are able to disarm someone because they are about to, and they've made it very clear that they're about to commit a crime, or they're making the threat of violence that is also itself a crime, and the police can then disarm you because of that, and then take you to court afterwards.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think I've got that later on down here. There's actually a lot of precedent for no due process to remove your rights during a crime or immediately following a crime. So an example might be if you've been taken in for, having made a bomb threat or something like that, they can compel you that you no longer have a Fifth Amendment right to stay silent. They can compel you to tell them where it is that you put the bomb, which is self-incrimination. But because you've provided such an immediate public danger, and it's during the commission or immediately after the commission of a crime, your rights are up in the air for that. And there's plenty of court cases that have made those decisions already. There's precedent for that. But these are talking about things. These are talking about red flag laws. We're talking about things that are prior to a crime, which is something else I'm going to get into. Is we don't have a precedent in this country for pre-crime. This isn't.
And we shouldn't.
Yes,
we don't want to start it.
We shouldn't. There's no good way to do that. So rereading all of the stuff that I read while I was muted. Thank you, Krieg Blackpaw. I appreciate the lemon, or the diamond. Actually, it's like 1,000 lemons. It's so much better. Or it's 100 lemons. There we go. Krieg says, confiscation without a crime is unconstitutional. The end. I agree. And so what What I also agree with is Dan here. I don't disagree with what he said about having a reasonable discussion about it. And I wanna preface that though. Let me finish here. Is he's right that it is a thing that deserves discussion. Hence why Dyer and I are discussing it tonight. And our conclusion is going to be, spoiler alert, we are against them. And fundamentally, we believe that it is not possible to make a good, quote, good red flag law. Dan was trying to make the distinction between good and bad red flag laws. But what we're going to lay out here tonight is going to basically show that we don't think it's possible to make a good red flag law. But it does require some discussion to understand why it's not possible to make good red flag laws. Yes, red law bad, but we are better than that. We are smarter than that. Dan is correct about that. And we're also more principled than that. So, don't shut off your brains. Let's give this topic its due discussion and find out why we don't like it instead of just immediately being against it.
Right. You don't know if you don't like it or if it's morally wrong or against your principles until you understand it. I think what he's describing is not a red flag law, or it's so different that it no longer should be called by the same term. I know he's saying it's a group of laws, but the common factor that the existing laws have is that there isn't due process. And he's trying to create something that basically is just it doesn't require a new law. It's the enforcement of current law.
It's like if you made a new ice cream flavor that had like chocolate and peanut butter and like crunchies in it, and you named the flavor like kale. Like, all right, like, well, like, all right, nobody wants kale ice cream, and you're like, no, like it doesn't taste like kale. It tastes like chocolate and peanuts and stuff like that. It's like, well, why did you name it kale? Like, if it's got good stuff in it, why would you give it a terrible name like that? Nobody's going to want to. Yeah, nobody's going to want to buy it. So it is. It's bad marketing for if you're not proposing a law that skips due process. It is very bad advertising to be calling it red flag laws, which is one of the big things that I hope Dan has learned since this debacle.
Right. I mean, he might be like, okay, what he means is not bad, and he's like, well, that's just the term I'm going to use. Well, now he's going to waste time with a conversation about what he means by red flag laws every time he talks about it, rather than just talking about what he really means, about the law that he's actually proposing, right? He's got to constantly be having to define it to people because he's using a definition that is not normal.
Yeah. So we've got some actual laws that have been attempted. So we're talking. A lot of people are talking about this again now, but there's been some states that have actually been working on some stuff. So Connecticut, I think, has the oldest one. They have something called risk warrants, which they created in 1999, and that gets into what we were talking about before, where it's a red flag law by any other name. So they're calling theirs a risk warrant. And they've had about 2,000 risk warrants issued in the last 20 years. And very recently, this past May, they had kind of a higher profile usage of it. A guy named Justin Olden. Thank you again, Krieg. I'll get to that in a second. They had a guy named Justin Olden who told his coworkers that there was going to be a mass shooting if he ever if he kept getting assigned bad jobs. And so I believe he was working for the city, and it says something about having to go work garbage duty, which, I'm not going to say the context in which he said it. The report didn't go into that, but I don't know. I could imagine a context in where he maybe wasn't fully serious about it, but that's not for me to decide. That's for a court to decide. Anyways, his co-workers reported on it, and this risk warrant law was used to remove 18 rifles from his home, but he was not arrested. So, Dar, you want to read the rest of that?
I don't. You're starting at 17?
Yeah.
So 17 other states have similar laws. As many as 10 of these states enacted red flag laws after the Parkland shooting. Ohio looked to enact one after the Dayton shooting, by a Elizabeth Warren shooting, which was by a Elizabeth Warren supporter, who's anti-gun.
Yes.
Ironically, they withdrew support 2 months later. Arizona did the same thing after the El Paso shooting, the same weekend. This indicates that there's typically a reaction to an event. Not necessarily a bad thing. Most people want to respond to an event, but it's something to note that these are not only popular when these are only popular when people were recently scared. Not a great basis for passing a law. You should be passing a law because you're scared. You should be passing a law because it actually solves the problem. A lot of the laws that are proposed, if you actually reflect on what the situation of what actually happened, you'd realize that even if you'd had that law in place, it wouldn't have stopped that particular shooting.
Yeah, and it's suspect too that again, a lot of these get passed when people are scared, which is, we've had laws on the national level get passed when people are scared too. I mean, I'm thinking about the Patriot Act, and we've seen how that was abused the last few weeks here with the Russia investigation, but that's another topic.
Craig.
Oh,
Krieg said, "Thank you for the diamond, Krieg." He said, "Wrong pronoun equals hate speech." Equals violence equals red flag. Yes, that's the problem with how these laws could, if you give the power to the government to to take away the guns without due process, and you can base it off of an accusation that's not been tried in court, and then you combine that with the left-wing redefinition of words, like calling words violence. You could have someone have their constitutional rights restricted or taken away from them based on bullshit reasons.
We've also had the redefinition of mental illnesses, where wanting to cut off your leg or your third leg or something like that. Some kind of body mutilation that's not mental illness anymore. Being confused as to which gender you are is not a mental illness anymore. But voting for Trump is a mental illness. So we've seen that be transitioned, and so one of the big things that these red flag laws are proposing to look at is mental illness. And how on earth could that possibly be abused?
Yeah, we also have the problem of different groups are being treated differently because of politics. So we have had a lot of feminists say on social media, "kill all men," and that's okay. Not banned from social media. No one called the police on them, or if they did call the police on them, it wouldn't be taken seriously because apparently women are allowed to make threats like that, even though they're not. I know they're not serious threats usually, but then we have an actual example of a guy saying "kill all women" satirically in response. And he did have his guns taken from him. A red flag order was actually issued with that as the basis. Him saying on social media, "kill all women."
And as an example of how something like this might get abused is, if we take a look at Title IX, which is something that recently came up in the news, and I'm sure I will be discussing that on Saturday. Something Dyer and I talked a lot about this week was Title IX in universities, and that's kind of this extrajudicial body that Obama just invented that allows the universities to set up their own kangaroo courts that don't require the burden that regular courts would have. And we've seen that when you have this pseudo judicial body, this fake court set up, that people get railroaded
talk
through
about
that.
Is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
How dare you? All right, Lysis says, Operation Homefront, you're doing great service, and I didn't read it quick enough. You're doing great service. Take care of our American allied forces. Love from Australia. Thank you very much, Lysis. We will make sure that $5 gets to Operation Homefront.
Thank you very much.
Where was I? Yeah. So we've seen examples of when you make these systems that operate outside of the regular court system, the legal court system, and we've seen that with Title IX, where you get railroaded through, no evidence is required, and so there's no reason to believe that wouldn't be the same effect here. And even if you could believe that it wouldn't necessarily be that would be the case, the possibility for that abuse does exist.
Right. So, and we also have the Title VI that we were talking about this weekend on the same topic.
Is it Title VI or Title IX? I don't remember.
Title IX and Title VI are different things. They're both on the same vein.
It's whichever one is the kangaroo courts that they're harassing men with.
So Title IX was the one for Me Too, for reporting sexual stuff.
That's the one. The fake rape courts.
So hate crimes should be Title VI, I believe. In any case, where do we leave off? Virginia law?
Yeah, you wanna get started on the Virginia law here?
Yeah. So Virginia law, initially introduced after a shooting. Surprise, surprise. Governor Northam, the blackface guy, but not Trudeau, the other guy who also supports killing babies.
Yes.
Proposed a law after being born. He proposed a law that would put forward that will be put forward in January that bans assault rifle sales. So assault rifles, he doesn't actually mean assault rifles as in the military term.
Yes, he means military grade AR-15 scary rifles, which is a defined class of weapon, not.
And the AR-15 has never been a battle rifle. So just
I remember you were telling me that it was specifically designed to not be a war rifle because it's got a lot of things that are not military grade on it that make it specifically easier to use for untrained civilians.
It's a civilian variant of the military battle rifle. So the law or the bill is proposed grandfathers existing owners if they register their weapons. Really, I am not a huge fan of the government wanting you to register your weapons because it's always the first step in confiscation is knowing who has them. Oh, jeez. It's also part of a large plan for legislators to introduce a lot more gun restrictions, including red flag laws. Reportedly, 80 of the 95 counties have declared, their police departments have declared declared themselves as sanctuaries, meaning they wouldn't enforce these red flag laws. That is the majority of the state.
Yeah, and I was trying to do some research before the show here because they have the reason why this is happening is because the Virginia state legislature just went really hard Democrat, but I'm trying to figure out how, if they've got so many counties that are against these laws, how they were able to elect that much legislature. And I didn't have enough time to do enough research to give you guys a full answer, but it is kind of what you might expect, where the big cities are where the population is. And they've got a lot of population in these big cities, and in just a handful of cities is where 50% of the state population is. So that is probably how this happened. I would have to do more research to understand why it seems like so many people are against it, but they also elected people who are for it.
That's what it's like in California. So in was that so?
Me coughing.
So in California, large swaths of the north and valley part of California is actually far more conservative and would vote Republican if they thought their votes mattered. However, that is a proportion of the land, right? But the actual population of California is more focused in the big cities along the coast. So those population masses, their votes outweigh the rest of the state, and that's why previously they had the conservatives had suggested plans of breaking California into 3 states, where you'd have 2 conservative states and just the coast would be one Democrat state where the majority of the population was at. And so basically those Democrat population centers with vastly different interests, those votes basically determine how everyone else in the state lives against their will.
Yeah. So long story short, these are the facts as we've seen them reported. The analysis as to why they are the facts, you guys will have to do your own research on that.
All right.
But yeah, so you got 80 out of 95 counties are talking about declaring themselves sanctuary, and at least one of the sheriffs of one of these counties was talking about deputizing all the citizens, saying that, well, he would be able to simultaneously follow the law of confiscating guns while also allowing his citizens to keep guns, because they would all be sheriff's deputies. So he would be able to use a deputization law to kind of counteract that as his way of following the law but also protesting the law, which is a unique take. And a lot of people are not sure. A lot of people really liked it when he said that, because it's a really, really crazy, bold idea, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna stick it to the Dems. And then there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I will be surprised if he actually does that, because there's a lot of problems that could arise from that. But we'll see what happens. And that's what this is going to force. If the Democrats are able to force laws like this into the legislature, the ways that you protest it, again, prior to going full black pill anarchy, the country's collapsing, civil war, prior to that, you're going to have to get creative with how you civilly disagree and civil disobedience against these laws. And I think this is an interesting it's definitely a creative take on it. And so the Democrats, obviously, in their exuberance to describe how they are going to destroy the Constitution and take all your guns, they were not happy with the reluctance that law enforcement in their state had shown in enacting this their new authoritarian regime.
How would they go get the guns themselves? And they'll know why the police officers don't want to do it.
Yeah,
they're going to get shot.
Exactly. So one Democrat rep, Jerry Conley, said, I would hope they either resign in good conscience because they cannot uphold the law which they were sworn to uphold, or they're prosecuted for failure to fulfill their oath. He told that to the Washington Examiner. Let's see here. When he was talking about what would happen if police refused to enforce the gun control measures.
Didn't the senators take an oath to uphold the Constitution? Who's not upholding their oath right now?
I don't. Well, it's actually interesting. So this actually gets into a states' rights issue, and I will maybe I'll say it now. While I disagree with all of these laws, I do think to the extent that they are enacted, I will always disagree with them, but from a constitutional perspective, I have less of an issue if a state implements them. I will still advocate against it, but from just a states' rights perspective, it is their right to enact their own law. I think it's a bad law, and I think that the federal government needs to come in and test out, where does the Fed start and the state begin? Where does the Fed end and the state begin? Because I think that would test that.
The state cannot enact any law that goes against the Constitution, though, and that would be defeated in the courts.
Yeah, and so, but to the extent that it is tested, the states are meant to be little labs of democracy. So where this should get tested at is at the state level. That a state, and it's only going to get tested if a state implements it, which I guess they already have, and nothing's happened. But I'd rather it happen at the state level than at the federal level. So to the extent that I like states' rights, I am all for states passing their own laws, and I think that whoever the executives are in those states should be executing those laws to the best of their ability. But to the extent that they conflict with the law of the land, which is the Constitution, then that then becomes unlawful. Let's see here. So this Virginia rep said also that the law is the law. If that becomes the law, you do not have a choice. You are a sworn officer of the law.
You have a choice.
Respect my authority. That's not
so.
The quote.
That argument right there is: what if you had a little Hitler in charge of that state, right? In charge of Virginia.
Yeah.
Are you just because they pass a law that makes it so you have to intern and kill Jews, that because it's the law you must follow it? No, that is absurd. You are you are not required, nor should you follow an unconstitutional law.
Yeah.
And you are held responsible for your own actions when you do try to enforce an unconstitutional law.
Yeah. So to continue backing up that threat, this Democrat Virginia state rep went on to say that, quote, they certainly risk funding because if the sheriff's department is not going to enforce the law, they're going to lose money. The county's attorney's offices are not going to have the money to prosecute because their prosecutions are going down. So basically he's threatening that, one, you better resign or we're going to prosecute you. And two, we're also going to be, to the extent that you guys are trying to civilly disagree with this, we're going to be cutting your funding and trying to starve you out, which is, I don't know how else this is not just the large city-state tyrannies that the founding fathers were so scared of having these little fiefdoms where you've got the big white towers in the city and they just control all the serfs for as far as the eye can see on all the farmland.
So what are they going to do? Take the police officers from those 15 counties to go try to arrest the police officers and sheriffs from all the other 80 counties?
Well, so
I think you're a little outgunned.
So interesting that you asked that, Dyer, is what would they do if most of the state's police officers are not going to enact this law? Well, one of the Democrats said, reportedly proposed that the National Guard would be used if local law enforcement does not comply with the law.
That's so stupid. Do you want open rebellion? Because that's how you get open rebellion.
Yeah, that's how you get open rebellion. So McEachin noted that Democrat Virginia Governor Ralph Northam could call the National Guard if necessary. Quote, this Democrat rep said, quote, and ultimately, I'm not the governor, but the governor may have to nationalize the National Guard to enforce the law. You wouldn't nationalize the National Guard for a state governor, would you? Isn't it just already?
They already follow the directions of the state.
Yeah, nationalizing it is when the federal government takes over the National Guard, isn't it? Is this guy just retarded?
I don't think he means that, but yeah, they're already under the state.
I think what he means is that we know that the National Guard is not going to do this, so we're going to. I think what he thinks is nationalizing it just makes the Guard have to follow your directions, is what it sounds like he thinks it says.
Okay, so he might think that the Guard is just a bunch of jarheads that will just do what they're told, but they're not. First off, they're also citizens. They're soldier citizens, so they very much, if they're they're going to be spread across those same counties. Many of them, I'd say the majority, much more likely if they're in the military or the Guard, to be even more opposed to these rules. It's a very good chance that they would not want to enact these laws, but furthermore, they are beholden to their own oath of service that says that they are to protect and defend the Constitution first, and then follow orders second. So any order from your civilian leadership to the military leadership and downward can only be followed if they are first constitutional. And I would find it very hard to believe that whatever general in charge of the Guard in Virginia, I highly doubt that they would say yes to this. And yeah, sure, the governor could possibly get that general fired, and then if his second might refuse and get fired too, they might even try to take them to court-martial them. But they lose because they would be following military law. But what happens is if they try to force the National Guard to do this, each officer they try to order has two options. If they say no, it's not like they say no and then nothing happens. Saying no means their career is going to be over initially they're going to be arrested and at least fired. Fired, most likely arrested and tried for disobeying orders. And they have that option of saying no, or if they say yes, Oh, BRB.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Or say yes. Most of them will say no, because if the one of them says yes, the officer below them more likely is also likely to say no. If they say no, they can do one of two things: say no and do nothing, which means that they're going to go to get arrested, or knowing that they're going to be immediately arrested and their lives could be over, possibly thrown in jail, they could try a coup. Why would you force the officers into that position where you basically are saying, do something that is morally incorrect and against your oath of office, or we're going to arrest you? Because if you put them in those two options, and their only way to fight is to either if they can fight by actually actively opposing the civilian leadership, by ordering all of their officers and soldiers below them to actively oppose the civilian leadership, or let themselves be arrested. I don't think you want to force the military into making those kinds of decisions. But even if you have a general at the top or multiple officers at the top that are willing to support these unconstitutional laws, most likely the vast majority of the guard soldiers and lower leadership are going to say fuck that and do their best they can to subvert that and or actively rebel against it.
Did we go through the whole way in which you got the 24-hour coup?
Sorry, TLDR, it's a dumb idea to even suggest using the National Guard for this.
Yeah.
Whoever suggested it is an unmitigated moron.
Well, and you can see it in the quote here. Is like, well, ultimately, I'm not the governor, but like, it could be his call. I don't know how serious this would be, but it is his option. Like this is the Democrats. They really get off on the idea of being in control of the jackbooted thugs going after the populace. Like they really get off on that. They just don't want to be the one holding the bag when that decision gets made.
Yeah. Jeez Louise. If they do this, people will die. Just either way, if they just enact the red flag laws, people will die because there will be conflict, and it will be abused.
Yes.
And people will have they're innocent, have done nothing wrong, will have their guns taken from them, and many people will choose to not just freely give them up.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry. Go on.
Yeah. So I mean, if this is happening on an individualized level, in states where you've got existing laws and stuff like that, I think it is of greater benefit to the war to again concede the battle of your house and take them to court. I understand, but if you've got and to the extent that they're actually going to do this, I think it's the Dems blustering. I think it's them just kind of getting off on the idea of sending out the National Guard to go round up all their political enemies. I really do. I really think it's like a fetish that they have. They love that. So I don't think this is actually going to happen. But if you've got a situation where the governor is saying, all right, we're declaring a state of emergency. The police force statewide is not doing the laws. We're going to send in the National Guard. They're going to come in and they're going to go raid all your houses. At that point, some kind of Custer's last stand kind of a thing, that could be, that's something. That's why I said at the beginning of this is there's no way that Dyer and I could possibly recommend to you specifically what to do in your specific situation. But it is something that if you own guns, planning on owning guns, or you support the Second Amendment, or you know people who own guns, think about this. Listen to what we said, listen to what other people are saying, but do a lot of self-reflection and think about what's going on in your state, what's going on nationally. What do you think are the different levels of different things that could happen to you if you're a gun owner? And what is it that you would think through on your responses on that? But it's something that you definitely deserves to be thought through beforehand so that when it does happen, you're not acting on visceral, raw emotion and possibly making a mistake that is, these are very dangerous. These are very dangerous laws. There's no way around that. But if you can think through a way beforehand that is not quite as dangerous for you, that would be optimal.
So Triumphant says, couldn't the cops accuse the National Guard of being a threat to the community and strip the National Guard of their guns?
Well, and that's actually, I mean, that's what you could have happen, right? So the police here are saying that they're not going to enforce the law, that they're not going to enforce this law. That doesn't mean that they've just disappeared. They haven't just despawned from the board. If they are talking about they're not going to enforce this law because they think it's a threat to their community members, if the National Guard then comes in, you potentially have a situation where not just gun owners, but gun owners led by the police have now formed a posse to protect their town.
And everyone has been deputized.
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually exactly right, Trevor. That's something that would potentially happen, is that you would have the National Guard coming down the road in their Humvee, and then they'll come up against a barricade of police cars, and then you've got 10 guys in the 10 National Guard in the Humvee, and then you've got 20 police that are coming up out of the ditches and coming out from behind their cars, and there's just more of the police than there is a National Guard. And that's what you'd have situations, is you would have all across, if this were to happen in kind of the, over the course of a single night kind of a thing, you would have that where whichever group has more people or more guns, that's who's going to win that little battle. And that's, again, this is I don't like speculating about this, because you start going as like black pill about it's the whole state is falling kind of a thing. It's a possibility, and that's the possibility that the Dems have put forward with this, and something to think about. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think, and maybe just from my own personal psychology, I think I don't want it to be a thing that would happen, but it's still a possibility. So I
think there's a lot of obstruction and opposition that can happen that is short of conflict that will happen first, and that I'm pretty sure I am hopeful and expectant that cooler heads will prevail, and that they will not actually go to that level. It's possible that that is an option. It's been suggested, but it's also incredibly retarded, and I think that that's not going to happen, but it could.
Yep. So I will close on that section, which we got other sections. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I've said it for other stories. I think it's an incredibly amazing thing that America has a military under civilian leadership. That's maybe not necessarily unique in modern times for Western countries, but it's certainly unique that happened over the course of all of human history. It's a very well thought out way to run a country. We don't have, we're not living under a military dictatorship. However, while the civilians are the leaders of the military, we still cannot give the military unlawful orders. And these types of red flag laws, these would be unlawful orders, unconstitutional orders. And it is the hope that the military would not enact on a unlawful order.
Yep. So other attempts to enforce that have happened are once police in so these are examples of recent times that red flag laws were enacted or were enforced. Attempted. So a police officer in Raymond, Washington, confiscated 6 guns from a 23-year-old man because of his social media posts, the ones I mentioned before. He said to kill all women, and he also made a joke about the Joker movie, about him getting a ticket to go to the Joker movie. The man was neither arrested nor charged with a crime. He did have his guns taken from him. In addition to the guns, police took several high-capacity magazines, because why not? So later on...
Were they high-capacity magazines, or were they clips? Or were they clipazines?
Clipazines, probably.
Okay.
So as I told you before, there is an initial enaction of the red flag order where there is no due process, and then they are required by that law to then go through the due process after they've already enacted the punishment. And then after that, they investigated and found that there was no evidence worth taking the guns from him, and they gave his guns back. which led to multiple articles saying how come these red flag laws aren't working? We're not protecting women, because they were still taking that "kill all women" quote as being literal, rather than him mocking the existing meme of feminists saying "kill all men."
And this goes back to the discussion I had earlier about how important it is for Trump to have been able to pack the courts, and that's what he's been secretly packing the courts for his whole presidency now, that the Dems have either not been paying attention to, or they really haven't been able to do anything about it. But him packing the courts is going to allow that the states who do have these laws currently on the books, they're going to be harder to enforce, or they're going to be harder to enact now. There's going to be stricter punishments when they're enacted improperly, because you're going to have a lot of conservative judges that are just going to say, no, not in my jurisdiction. That is not a lawful law. We are not doing that. That's unconstitutional. And in states that don't currently have these laws, they're going to have a hard time getting them on the books, as more and more conservative judges are going to be in state judiciaries saying, no, that's not how that works.
Trump says he's clearly going to take 6 guns and kill 3.5 billion women.
Clearly. Got those high capacity magazines, right?
And they're really high capacity magazines.
I saw this like meme on Twitter. It was like super high capacity magazine, but it curved. It was like a banana one, but it just kept curving, and it just looped into like this giant spiral for like 5 or 6 spirals. It was awesome.
I know this is not the most important thing, but economically, think how expensive the ammunition would be to kill 3.5 billion women. I don't think he could afford it.
Moving on. Danger zone. Okay, no. We need a safe word, Dyer.
But all joking aside, he made, basically, this was a comment on social media. There was no victim and not a specific or credible threat. So inherently, it required that some stranger who doesn't know this guy, who was not actually a victim or the threat of an actual, or not a victim of an actual threat of violence, this person called the police and had his gun taken from him. This is an example of how red flag laws can take a situation where there was no crime committed and no victim and still take away someone's constitutional rights.
So this will become the new swatting. That's what the fear that this could have, because swatting already is something that it shouldn't be so easy that you have the police come to your house and you accidentally get shot, that people have turned it into a thing that they do to each other to try and hurt each other. And this will be something that's used as the new swatting technique. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, probably. Just like we needed another way for people to use the force of government to try to kill someone. Yeah. Jeez Louise.
Did you read through all that?
I did not. But I was typing over Power Overwhelming to be funny. There's also another example of an Arizona guy who was killed recently, and this story that I wrote down is not from that. So in Ferndale, Maryland, 2 police officers were ordered to remove firearms from a house on a red flag protection order. They fatally shot the armed man. In the early morning, a man identified as a 61-year-old Gary Willis answered the door, and there was a fight over his gun, and he was shot. Now, this was a story that's been referenced a few times as the case of a red flag order where someone was killed. Now, this actually is a misnomer. So they were also doing a red flag order because he had made a credible threat to his brother. Basically, he was living on a property owned by his brother, where his brother has the full rights to legal rights over their elderly parent. And this guy was regularly drunk. He was an alcoholic. And on the day prior to this interaction, which is less than 24 hours before this interaction, he said, after an argument, that he was going to kill his brother, and specifically that he was going to shoot his brother. So this is a credible threat with an actual victim.
Which
now,
is
the police,
against the law, outside of red flag laws.
So they did a red flag order, but they also were doing a forced eviction. So the police arrived there, and he was irate because he was being forced off the property where he lives and having his gun taken from him. So this is not an example like the previous example I gave, where someone had done nothing wrong and had committed no crime and there was no victim, and that person had their guns taken from them. This is actually a poor example that sometimes references as a victim of red flag laws.
Well, and I think was it clear or was it unclear that they actually had used red flag in this situation? That they actually used a red flag law to go after him?
They did use it, but they didn't need to.
Yeah, so that goes to one of my key takeaways from this red flag discussion in general, is that the red flag laws appear to be a way of shortcutting existing due process. So this guy, one, he was being evicted from a place that he wasn't supposed to be at, so that's already a law. If your landlord tells you to get off, you need to get off. That's how land ownership works. And you're not allowed to threaten to kill people. That's already against the law. There's, again, credible threat. So they had legal ways of going after this guy and making sure that he was not a threat to the community. But they used red flag to shortcut that because it was easier. And that is not what we want. We don't want, it's hard to do this the right way, so let's just add a law in there that lets us shortcut it and get into, do it quicker and make sure we do all the stuff that we want to do without having to have to go through the full process. And that's what it seems to be kind of across the board, is that these red flag laws are a replacement shortcut for existing laws that take too long to enact. So one of the things that I think would be, instead of not a red flag law, but a solution to known credible threats, getting through those faster, is I wouldn't have any issue if somebody proposed, let's make a special classification of courts that's able to handle these really quickly. If there's a credible threat made, it can run through that regular process that we've already had on the books for, decades, centuries probably, that you're not allowed to make threats to people. Let's have a special class of courts that runs through those really, really quickly, so that we can actually go through the due process properly. And then if this guy's a danger, let's get him off the street. Let's not, we're not going to make a just new law that shortcuts the courts. That's absurd.
Yeah. Here's an example of how this could have been done completely without red flag laws. So he makes a credible threat of violence, and he has a firearm to do it. He gets there, and he's arrested for questioning based on that crime he committed. And then when he's arrested, he could be charged with a crime. He would be, and then he could be held for that, and not released and held in detention for the length it takes to go through the court case. I would suggest making it quick as possible, because it's pretty cut and dry, right? But give him a chance to defend himself. Give him a lawyer. Give him a full due process. But he's detained because he committed a crime, and he's being treated as a threat. In that meantime, while he's in detention, obviously he doesn't have a gun on him, does he? And then if he's found guilty, part of the punishment is not only the jail time, but to have the gun taken away from whatever time is required by law.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's an important point to make. Is the Democrats always, part of the straw man is saying, well, you just don't want to take guns from anybody. That's absolutely false. There's plenty of laws in the books that, if you are found guilty of them, if you have felonies, if you are a domestic abuser, as one reporter found out when they were trying to buy a gun for a story to show how easy it was. It's a whole other story. But there's a lot of laws in the books where if you are convicted of this of breaking this law, you have your rights modified. You are no longer allowed to have your Second Amendment rights because you've violated the societal norm, and we've decided that once you've violated that once, you don't get to have this right anymore. And so there's a lot of precedent for that. So one of the things, again, for this instance, exactly what Dyer said. He said a credible threat. They could have arrested him. They could have charged and convicted him with making threats. And then they could have, in the state, had, part of the punishment for breaking the law of making credible threats could be either a gun probation over a certain period of time or a permanent ban on. I wouldn't have any issue with that. If the states want to make breaking certain laws, part of that punishment is probation or restriction on your gun rights, that's fine. There's plenty of precedent for that.
But the big difference is, it's that he actually was able to to actually arrest that person, there had to be real credible evidence.
Exactly.
The police would have to have credible evidence to actually arrest him, instead of the a much lower level evidence required by red flag laws. And then he only has his right curtailed after he's been found guilty. He has his full due process.
Exactly. So if we need to make a special class of courts that can run through these credible threat issues faster, that's fine too. But the solution is not to just be like, doing it the right way takes too long. Let's just not do it. That's not the solution. But there's a lot of creative solutions that I think have a lot of precedent in current U.S. law that don't violate the Constitution that could be done. You want to move on to the next story?
Yep.
Okay. So the next one that is an example, which is actually a non-example of a red flag law, is Whiskey Warrior 556. So you guys may have heard of this guy from a few weeks ago. I think it was around Thanksgiving. And not to bury the lead here, this actually was a big hoax. And so Whiskey Warrior 556, actually it was actually happening on a Saturday during one of our live streams, because I found it after we got off stream. But he was basically live streaming what he said was the cops coming into his home or surrounding his home, trying to execute a red flag law on him and take his guns. And he had a quote-unquote standoff for about 8 hours with cops outside his property, and he was live streaming it basically the whole time. And the internet really got whipped up into a frenzy over this. He was he's a soldier. He was wearing his his military uniform while he was streaming here. And so everybody was saying, they're just harassing soldiers, or they're coming over and taking his rights. There was some information that had gotten out that it was for it wasn't for a red flag law. It was for some kind of domestic violence issue. And they're saying, the cops are just saying that it's a psyop. They're trying to smear him. And so it really got everybody up into a frenzy. But again, like I said, this was fake. This was not that it didn't happen, but the reason why was not for red flag. It was a hoax. So let's see here. So this was really the cliche nightmare scenario that everybody's theorized is, red flags are coming after U.S. soldiers because they got PTSD and, they're just going to harass them because the left hates them. And so I don't want to spend a lot more time on this, but basically the real story is that this guy was actually in the middle of a divorce. He wasn't living with his wife and kids at the time. And the house that he was in, that he was streaming from, was actually his wife's house. And so he wasn't supposed to be at that house. That was part of the divorce proceedings. And so the reason why he was in a 7-hour standoff with the police is because he was in a house that he wasn't supposed to be in. And he was also having some kind of domestic disagreement with his wife, which I think is what prompted the incident. There was not reports that I saw that it was anything to do with violence, so I don't want to smear him with that. But there was some other issue that was not red flag, and so a lot of people that were initially very invested in this guy, the situation was happening live. I don't know, some of you guys out there I know saw this when it happened live, but if you hadn't seen it live, it was live streaming, the cops coming in to get you for a red flag law. Yeah, that got a lot of people really fired up over the course of 7 hours. So a lot of the people that were really invested in this thing happening, when they found out that it wasn't for red flag, a lot of people started describing it as him crying wolf. Dyer.
Don't call me.
So don't if they're coming after you for red flags, don't cry Dyer. So the real lesson here though is that red flag laws are outrageous. The executing a red flag law is absolutely an outrage. But before you get your pitchforks out, you need to verify that it is actually a red flag law that is being executed. Given again, like we said before, there's a lot of very lawful reasons why the police go after people. That's the whole point. We're very pro blue on this channel. And so that's I know some of the hardcore anarchos are going to disagree with this, but in general, the police are out there to protect you, and they're supposed to be executing the laws that were passed by the legislature that we voted for. It's supposed to be a good thing. So in general, when they're doing something, you got to default to that's what they're supposed to be doing. And so given how effective this Whiskey Warrior guy was in getting the internet ginned up and outraged by just saying, oh, they're doing this to me just because of red flag, even though that's not why it was. I definitely think that is a tactic that will be used again because it was very effective to say, if they're coming after you for whatever reason, just be like, oh man, they're coming after me for red flag, and you'll get the whole internet mob to come to your rescue, whether it's true or not. So for your guys' purpose, the lesson here is to, as with everything with mass shootings, all that stuff, we all know every news story, and I know it's hard to do it sometimes. You can't jump to conclusions when the stuff's happening live. You got to wait for some of the details before you start getting outraged about it, because this guy, he abused the outrage that people have over red flag laws for his own personal gain, and the other people will do that. So be mindful of that when you hear this in the future, or if you even hear about this Whiskey Warrior guy. Now you know that the story was fake. Again, not that it didn't happen, but it didn't happen the way that he said it.
Yeah, just because this story was fake, or was a bad example, right? It doesn't mean that red flag law, it discredits the arguments against red flag laws.
Exactly, that is true too.
That's the important part.
Yes. So red flag law is still bad, but if it's not actually a red flag law, don't be bad about it.
So Triumph had a funny or a poignant comment actually, saying, so why is it limited to guns? Well, you made this same comment before.
Yeah,
why is it not cars and knives?
That's one of my key takeaways, which I'll run down and read that now. So, no, that's fine. You keep reading what he said. I'll find where I was right.
Okay, he said, so why is it limited to guns? Why not take away cars from people who are arrested for drunk driving, confiscate their property? Yeah, I agree. You should not just take away someone's property or rights without due process.
Yeah, so I've got if it's red flag laws for guns, why is there no red flags for knives, or red flags for acid, or red flags for vehicles, or red flags for blunt objects? If someone is in imminent danger with a gun, which is the whole point of red flag laws, right? It's not about, oh, we don't got time to run through the courts with a credible threat. It's got to be right now. He's got to do it right now. He's in imminent danger with this gun, so we need to go in and take the guns. Why are they not in imminent danger in general? If someone is too dangerous for a gun, imminently, again, if they're predicted to be an immediate danger to the public with a gun, then they're too dangerous to be in the public, and they should be arrested. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it, well, it's only the gun that's making them so dangerous. But in general, they're just fine to be interacting with the rest of the society. They're just a normal person. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Like, it cannot be both, that they are so dangerous that they cannot have a gun. And again, this is for people who have not been previously convicted of a felony or something that would otherwise tell them that they can't have a gun. For people who've not been committed of a crime previously, for some reason have become so acutely, so immediately dangerous that they can't have a gun, but they're also still fine to be in the rest of society. Yeah, it's having it both ways, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Whatever reason that they are having for taking someone's guns away has to be serious enough that they would arrest that person. If they don't have a standard of evidence or a crime that would give them the legal right to arrest them, then they don't have the legal right to remove any of their constitutional rights.
So, I mean,
cut and dry.
If you take a look at this in other countries that we always reference when we're talking about gun laws in general here, about the failure of gun laws to stop crime in other countries, the UK is always a great example. Well, it's a terrible example of, when they don't have guns, they use knives and acid. So, is London going to start having red flag on acid and red flag on knives? I mean, they might. They're crazy, but is that the world that we want to live in, though? Is it if we did, for instance, in America, get to a generalized gun ban, we would have the exact same thing. It's happened in every other country that they've had big gun bans in. Is you have an uptick in knife and acid attacks or vehicle attacks, as we've seen in a lot of European countries too, which is just as horrific. So let's run down this road 20, 30 years from now. Are we going to, in 30 years, be talking about red flag laws for cars, red flag laws for, well, we'll probably have self-driving cars by that point. Or we have red flag laws for knives. Or we're going to have red flag laws for getting, bleach. I mean, where does this end? So again, it doesn't make sense that if you are too dangerous to have a gun, in my opinion, you're too dangerous to be in society. And if there's evidence that you are too dangerous to be in society, you should be arrested. That's the point of an arrest, is to, if you think through what the actual meaning of an arrest means to stop something. And so when you're arresting a person, you're stopping them from being a person in society. You're pulling them out. You're stopping their ability to do something. And so it just doesn't make sense that you can have it both ways. And so again, the basic premise of these laws is that the removal of the gun will remove the desire / the ability to commit, some of the times they're talking about this for suicide, but a lot of times they're talking about this for murder, going out and killing other people. Although they do talk a lot about red flag laws for suicides, but they're saying that removing the gun will remove the desire or ability to do these things. There's no evidence to support this. Again, you can still use knives, still use cars. You can kill yourself a billion ways to Sunday. Not that you should. To make the case for red flag laws on guns, you would need to make the case of a red flag law on anything that could be used as a weapon. Doing some research on this. This comes from an article that was talking about Dan Crenshaw and what he said earlier this year that we just watched the video on. Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com said, quote, "I also think the conversation needs to address the fact that these red flag laws only deal with any firearms a person might own. As Rep. Crenshaw explains it, there can be a clear and convincing evidence that an act of violence is imminent, but virtually every red flag law deals with legal gun ownership only. The person who's planning a violent act may have their firearms seized, but their car keys, matches, gasoline, sharp knives, and other tools could still be used to harm others left behind with them. That's the problem. The solitary focus on firearms understandably leads to gun owners and the Second Amendment supporters that see these laws as gun control solutions to mental health or criminal justice problems." And that's exactly right. It's if the goal of these is to stop a violent act, they fail utterly in that. They make no sense for that. If their purpose of them is to enact gun control, they make a lot of sense. But they do not make sense if the goal is to keep people safer.
Right. So Trump said it's guilt by accusation, guilty until proven innocent, and that's exactly the problem with it. We've said it a bunch of times. The whole point of the laws is to take away someone's due process, and that is unacceptable. And it's ineffectual. Like you said. The only real effect of this is not going to reduce any actual violent crime. It's not going to protect anybody from anything. It's only going to work towards the anti-gun agenda. That's the only thing it's going to do.
Yeah. So let me do I'll do this little bit on pre-crime, and then you can get back into why it's difficult to combat on stage. So one of the things we talked about was, the idea behind these red flag laws is about, kind of this premonition of violence. You've got this idea that you can predict a crime before it happens, and we're going to prosecute you before you do this. It's pre-crime from the Minority Report. And so if it could be known for absolute certain that a person was a danger, if it was possible to predict the future, that you knew 100% for sure this guy will absolutely kill somebody if we don't take his guns. Yeah, hell yeah, I'm for taking his guns. It's very childish to look at it that way, though. Of course, of course, something childish is something that the left could understand. There's no possible way that you could establish 100% certainty of a future crime. If anybody has a way of doing that, please let us all know. We could totally revamp the entire justice system if you have a way of doing that. It would to know that it would require omnipotence. You'd have to be a god, or you'd have to have at least a time machine. No one is qualified to just arbitrarily decide something that would require omnipotence. No person, no police officer, no psychiatrist, nobody's capable of being granted those extra constitutional powers to just declare that they know the future. That's outrageous. Again, we don't have any precedent in this country for pre-crime. This isn't the Minority Report. It's not a dictatorship. You can't just be convicted of thought crimes. And if we did set a precedent for pre-crime, then other things could be proactively prosecuted too. And are we to believe that would not be abused like no tomorrow? And once you get these red flag laws, you get it on anything, you're not going to need a spouse or a random passerby on the street or on your Twitter account to call you in for the red flag. They're going to automate this. This would be something to be really easy to automate with an algorithm. You got the YouTube algorithm out there. It's just going to start pulling red flags on you, because that's real accurate. And that's what we could expect in the future. If we have any precedent at all for pre-crime where you get to just skip through your constitutional rights just because, we got a law for that just skips around that.
This already exists in China. Yeah. They already have people who make disparaging comments about the government, and they get called in and questioned by police and have their rights curtailed because they said something that was politically not okay by the whoever's currently in charge. Now, Shadow Wolf asked a question. He said, "What if I, someone who generally is safe in society, but has anger problems and shouldn't own a gun?" Now, the thing is, he himself is determined that he should not own a gun, and thus he does not, because he knows that it's something that might tempt him to do something bad in a fit of anger. Now, that is fine for you to determine that about yourself. What is wrong is for the government to have the right to determine that about you, because even if you agree with them, in this case, when it pertains to you, you're giving the government the ability to do this to everyone else.
And another thing I don't have a problem with too is there's been a lot of discussion around using psychiatrics to classify people as not able to have guns. So to the extent that that's not being used in a red flag law where it's like, oh, well, we're just granting the psychiatrist, God powers that they can just decide that the Constitution doesn't apply to you anymore. That I'm not for. If there is scientific evidence around certain types of drugs that you are, quote, under the influence, that is something that I don't have a problem discussing. Again, it needs to go through the legislature. That needs to be decided on by a body represented by the country or wherever your state is. If your representatives look through the evidence and vote on that, I don't have an issue with that. Again, going state by state. We've got precedent for that. When you have concealed carry, many states, and I possibly think all of them, I know my state does, you're not allowed to conceal carry if you're drinking. That is a huge no-no. If you get caught with that gun while you're drinking, that is I don't know what the punishment is, but I know that's not legal to do that. So it would be the same thing if you're under certain groups of medications. You're not supposed to drive on them. You're not supposed to operate heavy machinery, and you shouldn't be holding a gun. So that I'm fine with too. Again, as long as it's going through the proper channels and there's proper evidence being cited for that, not just an arbitrary decision.
So I also go by the same rule with handling guns in general. There was a while back where I'd taken a sleeping pill because I wanted to make sure I fell asleep. I was on time, and my wife said, "Hey, would you mind cleaning the rifle for me?" And I said, "Nope, I don't touch guns when I'm on Ambien." So, you don't when you're drinking alcohol or you're taking any kind of pill that might change the way or how clear your thinking is. You don't touch guns if you are on a substance like that. And if you are someone who depends on a substance on a regular basis, then you shouldn't have a gun.
Yeah, and if they want to. I don't like this either necessarily, but I don't have a problem with it being discussed. And if it gets added in the legislature, that's fine. Maybe that's something that gets added to background checks, is whatever your medication history is. I don't know if I necessarily like that on its face, but again, if it's something that is,
that's a gun safety thing. Like I know I'm making a choice to not handle the gun. Yeah. The government shouldn't be coming in and telling me, because like in the case of Ambien, I could just not. Like most of my days, I'm not taking Ambien every day. That's a very rare thing. So, like, they shouldn't have the right to take the gun away from me because I took up Ambien one day, and then the rest of my life can't have guns.
I should do a red flag on Ambiens. Those things are gnarly.
Yeah.
But back on the pre-crime thing here. So there's. Again, we don't have a precedent for pre-crime, but we do have a precedent for a conspiracy to commit a crime. There's a lot of precedent, and there's laws around that. So if it's something that's well established and used pretty often, is that we've got credible evidence or a tip that somebody is about to commit a crime, and you can do investigations on it. There's all kinds of ways to do that, and those people get arrested and prosecuted for the conspiracy to commit the crime that they were going to commit. And so that is, to the extent that we do have a precedent for pre-crime, that would be it. But it's already a thing that exists, and it already lives in our constitutional due process framework. And so again, this is another example where you've got, it takes, it's really hard to get all that investigation in there. You got a lot of paperwork, and it'd just be a lot easier to go through the red flag law and not have to do any of that stuff. And that's what I keep seeing over and over and over again, is that every place that a red flag law could be used, there already exists a legal process that is probably much more difficult and more timely, and there's things that can be done to make those timely those long time processes that take a while to get through. There's ways to get those to run through a little bit faster, and so I don't got a problem with that. Let's streamline the system where it needs to be streamlined at. But I keep seeing this over and over again, where red flag laws, when you apply them, they're just skipping over existing due process laws. There's already laws in place that solve the problem red flags proposing to solve. It's just red flag skips all of that constitutional nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm. Shadow Wolf, if you need a way to relax, to calm down, try voting for Trump. It's very very calming and relaxing.
You should not also be handling a gun while you are watching the impeachment hearings. I can say that for.
Oh no! Don't do it! Don't do it!
I could say that for 100% certainty. If you were going to watch the impeachment hearings, especially watching about 13 hours worth of them, like I did today, do not have a gun. You are in imminent danger to yourself.
I'm fairly sure watching those impeachment hearings is mind altering.
Yes. Yes. Does it give me thoughts of suicide? Yes.
Oh, jeez.
Alrighty.
Yeah. So, in the military, after suicides happen, and then also yearly, there is suicide briefings and anti-suicide training. And during one particular year, when I was sitting in a multi-hour resiliency training for anti-suicide stuff, and I said out loud to the people in the people around me, says, you know what I just realized? Not once have I ever thought about killing myself until just now.
It's a miracle Dyer's still in the military.
I know. I was low ranking this.
It's a miracle you made it out of low ranking. Jesus. You wanna tell us why why red flag laws are difficult to talk about on stage for debates? Why it's easier for the Democrats?
That's all emotional reasoning, right?
Yes.
It's really easy to say. It is really easy to say if they are a threat, then we should take away their guns. It is a very simple statement that misses the nuance entirely. It can be conveying in a single sentence and on its own. It can be conveyed in a single sentence or on its own is not entirely objectionable. Disagreeing with it is framed as, so you think dangerous people should have guns.
Yeah, they always flip it into the straw man argument.
Right. Talking against it requires discussing what could be 50 different processes, one for each state for responding to a threatening act. In quotations, this requires nuance in describing the legal process for getting a warrant and how there is a process that must be followed before revoking someone's rights, and how this process would be streamlined to keep up with the rapid response that Red Flag is ostensibly trying to achieve. This is boring and basically requires you to be a lawyer to understand it, and frankly, everyone listening to this last paragraph I've read has already fallen asleep. We've lost the argument because it's not dynamic and it's boring. Yeah. It's not emotional, and it doesn't get a reaction from
It's not as exciting as sending in the National Guard to go beat down the barn doors of all the hicks.
Yes, but it's the same reason why the red flag laws are successful right after a shooting and not successful later on when people actually have time to reason through it. It's because they're using an emotional argument to get what they want rather than actually a rational argument.
Yeah. And so it's pretty classic leftist tactic is reduce every argument to something that's very reductive and simple and misses all the nuance, but it's easily understood by emotional simple followers, and that's something that they do with a lot of different stuff. I mean, we got the same issue with climate change. So I think again we've discussed this. Conservatives of all people, we love the outdoors. We actually go outdoors. Yes.
Sorry, I like what Trembrant said. He made a great comment.
What's that?
He says, I want evil people not to have guns. People who are, say, trying to commit crimes.
Yeah.
I don't care about dangerous people having them. In fact, I think a lot of dangerous people should have guns, because dangerous does not mean they're dangerous to society. I think every trained killer in the military is dangerous, but they're also fighting for a good cause and they're not evil.
Are you saying instead of a gun-free zone, maybe a danger zone?
Terrible.
You loved it.
I did. I also cringed.
It had the intended effect. But the analogy I was making was to climate change is again because the conservatives always get painted as, oh well, you just want you want dirty streams and dirty air and all this stuff, and that's just not true. And we think that I'm a huge proponent of nuclear energy, which is extremely green. For more reasons than one, but the left is like, it's a nuclear reactor is not as pretty on a campaign ad. If you kind of imagine that silhouetted style that Obama has for his ads, it's, I think Bernie had it too. Was it's real cute to put some clip art windmills up on a hill there and be like, hope and change. It's not as cute and pretty when you put a nuclear reactor there, or a device called a plasma arc gasifier, which is something I've talked to Shadow Wolf about, is a very green and interesting technology that nobody's pursuing because it's not sexy. It's not like a windmill. It's not simple and easy to understand, and it doesn't kill nearly as many birds. But
I just decided that if I ever run for office, I'm putting a nuclear power plant on the advertisements.
Yeah,
as part of the logo.
I think it would look like a Simpsons thing too. It'd just be like really cliche. But yeah, I mean that's one of the issues is I don't know. It seems like it's a pattern. I don't know. I want to say this definitively, but a lot of conservative issues these days are our side's more well thought out. Therefore, it's more complex. Therefore, it's harder to describe. Whereas the left typically invests in things that are simple and emotional, and you don't need to even understand them. You just need to feel them.
And then, see, Trump actually used their tactics and won, because he comes up with extremely simple language for expressing the ideas. Make America great again. It's like hope and change, right? It's emotional. It doesn't really describe anything in detail. It's not really a platform, right? Yeah. But it means something to people. They have an emotional attachment. It means different things to different people. What to them means great is different than to someone else. But so Trump, he's using that same tactic where he'll say, build the wall. Obviously, building a wall is not a policy in and of itself, but yes, the wall is part of it, and it's a simple thing people can remember, can coalesce around, they can chant. It's got an emotional aspect to it, right? And it's also simple, and those kinds of arguments are successful.
Yes.
But Trump is also behind the scenes, things he's not making chants about. He's doing a lot of other things that are really, really important to the conservatives actually care about the nuance. He's, passing bills, but giving them no fanfare because they're not easy sells that have emotional language attached to them, right?
It's interesting too because the Democrats say that a lot of the immigration reform that Trump's pushing is, that's fear-based. Everything's fear. He's a fear merchant. Really? You're telling me that the gun laws that's not a fear merchant tactic, really?
Yeah. It's not fear. I don't think it's fear at all. It's realistic. So I think there's a problem with the spreading fear about something that is not dangerous to you. But it's responsible to, when a wolf is among the pack, among the sheep, to call out that there is a wolf, right? That's responsible, right? So one of the examples is so Trump gets everyone chanting about the wall and coalescing around the wall. Well, at the same time, he silently passes a bill that means that if you pass through a third nation on the way to the U.S., you're immediately rejected because you could have stayed at the other safe nation.
Fantastic.
He quietly organizes deals with Mexico to take in the migrants that are already there trying to come in and have them given living quarters there while waiting for their applications to enter.
He quietly renegotiated a really great deal on NAFTA. And
that wasn't quiet at all.
Then Nancy somehow, I don't know if you heard the rhetoric this week. Somehow that is all Nancy's baby now. She's taking full credit for that.
She slightly changed a few words in it. It's basically all the things that Trump wanted is in it, though.
Yeah, they were talking about that in the impeachment hearings today, too. A bunch of the Dems were taking credit for that. They were saying, we the Democrats passed this new NAFTA reform or whatever the hell it's called. I was like, really, guys? Wow, that's bold. You guys are going to take responsibility for what will possibly be, beyond one of the other things that Trump's doing silently is, again, like I said, packing these courts, all these judges. But, I think the courts will be his lasting, deep legacy, but the public legacy that everybody remembers, I think, will be this new NAFTA deal, which it's called something else. I forget what it's called. NAFTA is just it really just flows off the tongue. I don't know what the new one's called.
Yeah. So, Timberwolf made a great comment. He says that making a slogan is easy, making it work is another. And I think he's got a great point here, because after 8 years of Obama, do you think that our nation had, more hope and, I would say, positive change, or did we seem to regress back into more racial tensions, and do we collapse into more civil unrest? Do you think that our nation is more hopeful or way less hopeful? I would say that he had a great slogan that did not actually have the effect, whereas Trump's slogan, I think a lot of people would say, with the improvements in our economy, the improvements we have in security, and the reduction in military action, the improvement of our trade deals, that America is becoming better and maybe greater, in your opinion. I think his slogan is far more accurate.
Yeah. So I guess to try and put a bow on this, I guess what do you guys want to take away from this is, so at the end of the day, you're probably going to be to the point that you guys are going to be discussing with other people is, how would you debate or back up this position, right? So we've gone through the reasoning why we think that there are no good red flag laws. Oh, thank you, Silver Dio, for following. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sly Blue Paw. The USMC. That's not a. It's, I don't know. It's not as catchy.
Marine Corps?
Maybe. I don't know. So how do you explain to somebody else why this is not why are there no good red flag laws? I think one of the first and foremost is that, what is it, when somebody's proposing a red flag law, you need to identify what is the problem that they're trying to solve. Is the problem they're trying to solve is that they're not getting through these existing laws fast enough? Because I think what I've identified here is that every place that we've seen that red flag laws would solve a problem, there's existing laws there already that the red flag law is skipping over. And so I think that's one of your first steps, is to, what is it that the red flag law is trying to solve? And then, are there existing laws that are already there that the red flag law is skipping over? And then, now that you've identified where these laws already exist, is there a reason why the going through those processes is not fast enough, and is there a way to speed those up? Because if there's, we can't just keep passing laws over top of other laws that are just skipping around them, especially when one of those laws is the Constitution. We can't just skip over that. But I think that is. I think that's the tactic moving forward, is identifying what's the problem trying to be solved. Are there laws already on the books that solve these problems, but maybe they don't run fast enough. Maybe it's too difficult, there's too much paperwork, and they can be streamlined. And I think that's as conservatives arguing against this, as you're trying to explain this to Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw is looking to have a conversation. I think it is a good conversation to have, and I think that the end of the conversation needs to get to having the conversation. There's no problem saying that. It's what's at the end of the conversation. The end of the conversation needs to be, red flag laws are still bad, but here's why. And the reason why is because the problem you're trying to solve. Again, I think the problem the Democrats are trying to solve is they want to get rid of the guns. But, the idea is that they're trying to keep the public safe. And to the extent that you want to keep the public safe, that's the problem you're trying to solve. There's already laws in the book that keep the public safe without going over top of their constitutionally guaranteed rights. And we live in a constitutional republic. You cannot get around that. We can't just legislate. I know it's inconvenient sometimes, but it doesn't change the fact that we live in that. And when you're proposing laws, they have to fit under that. And we can't write laws that are skipping over that process.
Right. And that's how you'd argue to someone who's conservative or a centrist, moderate. But if you're trying to argue with someone who's on the left, you're most likely going to the core disagreement is going to be whether or not guns should be owned in the first place.
Yeah.
And you can't argue this without first answering that argument. So it really will be a fruitless argument in many cases unless you can attack the core behind their problem. Because you could say that you also want to stop gun deaths. You also want to make sure that criminals don't have access to guns, and you then explain that you just want to do that, but also ensure that we maintain our freedoms, and that there's a better way at doing what they're trying to do, and they're going to still oppose you regardless because they don't care. They don't think you should own guns in the first place. So no argument you make about freedoms towards that end is going to be effective.
Yeah, and so I've dealt with that a lot with. That was one of the big things I learned with when we used to have the ANCAPs around talking with them, is when you're debating somebody, you can't start at a high level that's way above anything that you guys have common agreement on. You have to start where you have common agreement on. So you're not gonna, if you're debating with a leftist, what I just said, that's not gonna be the place that you start, because they completely disagree with the premise that guns should even be a thing anyways. But where this would be a decent argument would be, we've got the right's a big tent, right? We got a lot of people in here. So we got a lot of people who still really like Dan Crenshaw. I think he's a great guy. You got a lot of people who are very, very unhappy with him for saying what he said. And I think that this is a decent argument to have with other people that are on the right that have disagreements about, I think it is a decent discussion to have about red flag laws. And I will never say that something is not worth having a discussion about. If it's a political issue, it's always worth having a discussion about. We don't just assume that I'm right and there's no reason to have a discussion about it. You've got to have discussions about these things. And so I think that these are really good arguments to have for other conservatives who haven't thought through it, or maybe they're just taking what they heard from Dan Crenshaw, or even discussing with people like Dan Crenshaw that are in positions to legislate this. Is all right, I want to open it up to the public. He's elected by the public. He's opening himself up to hearing what the public's opinions are, and I think that this is a way of discussing with somebody who has mostly that common ground with you, and both of your goals is to protect the population, to protect the public. And I think that these are pretty good arguments for someone like that. Obviously not with a leftist.
Yes. So to recap, red flag laws bad. Red flag laws bad.
I already gave that away at the beginning. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. We could have just saved the entire 2 hours and just said that at the beginning and then been done. Gosh darn it, we wasted so much time. Anyways, thank you guys for coming. I think that's the end of our show. So I think we're at $515 towards Operation Homefront. If you guys, anyone wants to throw in any last-minute donations, we are collecting these donations through to last day of December, and then I'll be donating the money. And then, so it's a great cause, helps out military families. Please donate. And just you do that through Streamlabs and put in Operation Homefront in the comment. Other than that, thank you very much, Fox. It's been a great show. I think it was a great discussion in my opinion. Thank you for everyone who was engaged. Blue Paw, Shadow Wolf, Triumphant, Timberwolf, Tetris Freak for the gifts. Krieg, all of you guys, thank you, Krieg, 3 times. All you guys were awesome. We'll see you guys on Saturday for the weekly news recap. But before I close, I am going, because the amount of interaction we had on the stream, I'm going to distribute the chest of 70.3.
What's in the box?
What's in the box? So you got 25 seconds to find out. Hopefully I win something. Can I win anything from our box?
I think that you're like... Because it's based off engagement, so I think you spamming boob gifts, I think that weights it towards you, which I don't know is fair. I think it's collusion. It's boob collusion.
I knew it. You're very welcome, Shadow Wolf. Thank you. You guys make the stream possible. It's not just me. It's not just Fox. Oh, Trump got 23.8.
I got some in there. That's nice.
That's cheating. You're on the show.
Yeah, I know, right?
Nice. All right, guys. I'll see you guys on Saturday. Direwolf out.
All right. V signing off. Out. Thank you for the ice cream, Timberwolf.
Thank you for the ice cream. Boobs. Suck it, CC. Boobs.
Oh, I thought that one was for me.